Hello guys, this is Ark, and Worlds 2023 Day 1 has concluded finally after 8 games, after 8 best of ones, of course. We have the conclusion of Day 1 of the World Championship 2023. First of all, I've got to say I'm really tired of all those games. It was quite a ride. I have a sore throat, so you might hear some coughing during this recap, which is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to recap the day. I'm gonna briefly go over what happened in each individual game, and let's get started. So the day began with T1 versus Team Liquid. Sorry for the spoilers. If you have not watched the games or the results, then why are you on this video? But yeah, the game started with T1. The day started with T1 versus Team Liquid. It was a matchup that pretty much everybody thought T1 would win, and T1 eventually won. But it was a very exciting game because Team Liquid actually had the upper hand for basically the entirety of the game. It was, I think, a 38-minute game or so. Um, if you go here, it was like 35, 30 something games, 35 minutes, I think, right? And Team Liquid had the advantage for the entirety of this game, and it was great as an early game from like Piosik and like specifically Piosik, but pretty much like APA did well and Summit did well. Um, TL held the advantage for like the entire game, and T1 just won a fight in the mid lane at 35 minutes and just pushed to win. Um, so my thoughts about this game is not the best showing for T1. I think Team Liquid kind of overperformed. They went into this tournament, I think, a bit more like free-headed, nothing to lose kind of mentality, and they just went all in. Piotr got Lee Sin, and he started like ganking everywhere, uh, being all over the map, and it really paid off for Team Liquid. Like they only did one mistake in that 35-minute team fight. They lost, and T1 pushed for the victory. I think people would expect more from T1, like a stronger showing. Of course, you can always count on T1 to, turn around these types of games against like those weaker opponents, so to speak. Like, no disrespect, of course, to TL, but uh, you can never count T1 out, and you can have a strong belief that they will fight some sort of like miracle team fight towards the end of the game to win it all. So T1 got a victory through fire and steel, and then we went on to Cloud9 versus Mad. So our EU versus NA matchup of the day. Um, I initially thought that Mad Lions would win this game, but C9 were steadfast. C9 proved that they are the best team coming from NA, and uh, the difference showed here. Even though like EU is generally better than NA, like for the past like several years, I think C9 is the only team from NA that kind of like transcends what NA is, who is usually like a disappointing region, so to speak, right? And C9 just kind of like transcends that. C9 is always a team that at Worlds usually they overperform. They do not play like a typical NA team, and it showed here that C9 is better than Mad Lions, and it's why they ended up getting the victory. It was not like the cleanest victory. Like it did have some back and forth for sure. Like the gold lead was not that big for most of the game. But I guess C9 just eventually ended up winning because they were the better team, better players, etc. So a win for C9 and some good news for the NA fans so far. Considering Cloud9 won and TL had a strong showing against T1, I guess this is probably like the best showing that NA has had in the past like several years, and NA fans can be hopeful because of this. Now, moving on towards two games where there was a clear favorite and a clear um, unlucky team, so to speak. So we have the Gen.G versus GAM, where obviously GAM got the hardest draw. I mean, drawing Gen.G or JDG would be the hardest anyway. And of course, we had JDG versus BDS. So on paper, both of those games, they seemed like they would be an easy win for both Gen.G and JDG, of course, but it was not the case for the JDG series. So Gen.G versus GAM, it went exactly as you would expect. Gen.G, I think, won in like 22 minutes or so. As you can see here, team comps and all that. Gen.G won in roughly like 22 minutes or so. Um, it was the prototypical Gen.G game, slow and steady, um, strong laning phase from pretty much everybody, um, strong mid-game decisions to capitalize on the advantages that they have. Of course, Chovy had a very sick game, being pretty much everywhere on the map. Great kill participation, most of out of his team, no deaths. Um, Again, it's a prototypical Gen.G game, and if you are a Gen.G fan, then this gives you hope because if you compare this game or this start to last year's Worlds, where Gen.G had a shaky start and generally a shaky tournament overall, then this game here gives you hope that you can see Gen.G at 100%. This was, excuse me, this was again the prototypical Gen.G game, and me personally as a Gen.G fan, I'm extremely happy for this that they play at 100%, and it's exactly what I expected from Gen.G coming into this tournament, especially against the GAM in the first round game. Now moving on to the JDG versus BDS match though. Um, it didn't exactly go as you would expect because BDS got the Garen top for Adam, the Casio for Nuke in the mid lane, of course, and BDS kind of teased the early game, kind of. With Garen and all that, they got a good pressure towards 369 in the top lane. They managed to get Adam some kills, and this gave them a strong foothold into the game. They even had like some sort of like gold league around like 2 to 3k, and for some time there, you would think that maybe BDS can actually do it. You would think that maybe BDS can actually win the game, can make like maybe the biggest upset in probably the entire tournament, right? But this is where the big difference in strength shows. This is the difference between a team that teases some kills, like some weird picks like Garen, and maybe the early game works, etc. But you play against an opponent who's considered like the best team in the world, and they're not good only in the laning phase, but they're also good in the mid game, the late game, all the macro decisions that you need to take throughout the game. Of course, mechanically, their players are exceptional, and that's why JDG managed to turn the game around and actually win this game. Um, it was some decisions um, from JDG around the Baron pit where they caught out BDS and they pushed to end the game at 25 or so minutes or 26, right? So It was not the cleanest game by JDG. You would expect they would be like dominating from start to finish. But even if that didn't happen, you got a glimpse of what a powerhouse of a team they are, because even if they were behind, it does not really mean anything. You have to beat JDG throughout all stages of the game, because if you're not decisive with your calls, and if you do not take correct calls, then obviously JDG will in the mid game, and if they are not super far behind, they will find ways to turn the game around and beat you. And with that said, we're gonna move on to G2 versus DK, D plus Kia, whatever you wanna call them. And this was, apart from maybe the T1 versus Team Liquid, this was the first super back and forth matchup of the day, and to be expected, of course, because both of the teams were of similar strength, and it showed pretty much in the entirety of the game. Like the entirety of the game, they were like super close in gold, like 2 to 3K for G2. Then DK got the advantage back for them, and then it was thrown back to G2. Um, it was a super back and forth game. G2 slightly more decisive with her calls. Kana was a big problem for DK, getting caught out occasionally. G2 got some good smites in for them to get the Ocean Soul, which rendered DK's poke comb kind of useless. Um, and that's why G2 ended up winning. They got the Ocean Soul, and they were able to like push to win. Hansama did well on his Draven, of course, and uh, Caps did not have like a real highlight in this game, but he had some insane defensive plays, especially one towards the bottom lane, second tower, where he got collapsed by 4 people and ended up getting 1 kill back before he died, which was massive. Um, Props to G2. It could have been either team's game to win. G2 ended up being the winner. I guess this is the game where you say that the team that makes the second to last mistake is going to win, right? And G2 was the team that made the second to last mistake in this game. All right, and moving on to NRG versus Weibo Gaming. Um, that was probably one of the most one-sided games. Weibo obviously won, much stronger than their opposition. Complete stomp from start to finish. NRG never got a foothold into this game. Like you can see, gold leads almost to 12K right there. Um, I don't think there's much to say about this game. It was kind of like the Gen G versus Gigabyte Marines matchup, only much more of a stomp. Gen G was like this is the thing. Like Gen G does not necessarily stomp their opponents. They just take a slow and steady pace that has no counterplay, and it's almost inevitable that Gen G will win, right? But the NRG versus Weibo felt like that Weibo was like hard stomping them throughout the entire game. Um, so yeah, nothing much to really say here. Uh, the only thing I'm gonna say is I'm still baffled about why NA gets a first pool seed at Worlds. Their first seed got hard destroyed by China's fourth seed, and this is baffling to me. Like, why is NA rewarded with a first pool seed at Worlds? Like, you see here that teams like D Plus or Weibo Gaming are like at pool 4, but NA gets a pool 1 team there. I don't get it. They do not deserve to be here. In any case, we move on to Fnatic versus LNG. Sorry about that. And this game kind of went how you would expect, just a bit back and forth, but generally LNG dominating Fnatic, Tarzan and Scout specifically being insanely good throughout the entirety of the game. Um, Tarzan might have had some, like a couple of overextensions that made LNG not close out the game much more quickly than they should have. Um, but apart from that, it was a complete stomp again from LNG. And Scout was, with this performance, was probably the MVP of the day, and I guess the other MVP would be Chovy. Um, as you can see, yeah, some of the KDAs 9-0 and 4 for Scout on Azir. Super strong play. He ended up with a couple more kills, I think. He got to 11. Has 11 kills here. Yep. So super strong performance by Scout to win against Fnatic, as you would expect, of course. Um, and with that said, we're moving on to the last game of the day, which was BLG versus KT. Of course, the Korea versus China game. And that was a chaotic game. That was a super chaotic game. Um, we got the Zac for Cuz. Um, it was super back and forth. Some mistakes from both sides, some capitalization of the mistakes from the other side, and so on and so forth. Gold lead, back and forth for both of those teams. Some sneaky barons taken. Um, Overall, it was BLG who was slightly faster into transitioning and collapsing on isolated targets, or being slightly better during team fights. Of course, they ended up also getting the Hextech Soul, which was pretty much the last nail on the coffin for on KT's grave, so to speak, right? But you can see here, even like at 42 minutes into the game, where BLG has a Hextech Soul, the difference is gold is pretty much negligible at this point. Like, you have a Kaisa on Amy with full build. Uh, 4 items on Keen, 4 items on PDD, of course. So it was a super back and forth game, and that could have ended with KT being the winners as well. But yeah, of course, it ended up being BLG at 45 minutes, of course. Um, Not the cleanest performance by most of the BLG players, but Bin had a fantastic game. A lot of engages onto Keen's Aatrox. That ended up being quite crucial for them to be getting like dragons and barons. Um, so to recap the entire day and some takeaways is that China is 4-0 on this first round, which is not necessarily surprising based on the strength of the teams, but based on previous years, you would not see LPL dominate the group stage as much. But since this is Swish, then things can be different. Um, Korea is on 2 wins and 2 losses, and clearly Gen.G was the best team out of all Korean teams. Of course, strength of schedule has to be taken into account, and I have to say that both Damwon and KT did have good showings against quite strong teams as well. So we will have to wait on round two to see how they perform against potentially a weaker team. Um, T1 is still a big question mark if they are able to perform at the standards that we know of. I think it was kind of like an unlucky game against Team Liquid. I think they kind of like disrespected them a little bit, and it's why the game went as long and was as hard as it was. I expect T1 to like find their pace again, but of course they have to play at the 1-0 bracket here, where they might face a stronger team, and we will see how it goes. Um, but after round one, from the Korean side, I'd say that Gen.G is by far the team that you would put your faith in um, as the strongest team. And on the Chinese side, um, Weibo did great, but of course it was against NRG. LNG did great, but of course it was against Fnatic. JDG did great. Like all the LPL teams did well, but I think BLG had the strongest opponent and did quite well as well. Even though it was not like a super convincing victory, it was a victory nonetheless. So I think all of the LPL teams did well. Um, the Korean teams not as much, but I think that regardless, they will all show up towards the next the upcoming games. Another thing that I'd like to point out is between the G2 and DK series, for my pick'ems and general predictions about the 8 teams that will make the knockout stage. This victory by G2 over Damwon is massive because for most people, the 7th and 8th place will be contested between G2, Damwon, and Weibo Gaming. And G2 now having a victory over Damwon is massive for that for those 2 spots. So we will of course see who the better who the better team will be, who will advance to the knockout stage. The draw hasn't happened yet. I literally made I'm literally making this video right as the last game ended. Um, so I will make a separate one for tomorrow's games and my predictions. Um, I guess the MVP for the day will have to be a third MVP between Scout from LNG and Chovy from Gen.G. Uh, Scout had a very strong Azir game. He had an early roam, which gave LNG basically early advantage they needed for them to snowball the game and win over Fnatic. Um, Gen.G, again, if you have watched any of Gen.G's games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Again, this was the prototypical Gen.G game. Um, Peanut moving around the map, Chovy being there to follow, great movements. Chovy being always where he needs to be. He played his signature Ari, um, which is like what 17 and 2 or something. It's insane. Um, it was a super strong performance by Chovy as well, like 0 deaths, same for Scout. Super high KDA for both of them. Great move around the map, and I guess it's a deserved MVP for both of them. Um, Overall, I would say it was a super exciting day of League of Legends. Every game mattered here, and every game will matter even against like weaker teams because every win and every loss counts here. Um, Super exciting day. You had your games that went exactly how you thought, like Gen.G versus Gam. So you had your stomps, which are fine if the team that is winning is the one you support. You had the super back and forth between G2 and Damwon and BLG and KT. You had the EU versus NA. You have the Korea versus China. You had the two kind of upsets that almost ended up happening. So T1 versus TL was almost an upset, but T1 ended up winning. G2 versus BDS, it was not exactly almost an upset because you always knew that JDG would win in the end because they are the better team. Um, but they still had to turn the game around. T1 versus TL, you could see that TL could win the game because they were super hyped and all that. Um, but yeah, the first day, the first round of the Swiss stage seemed very exciting, and I'm hoping that tomorrow's games will also be exciting. So with that said, I'm gonna end this video, and I will make another one a bit later on with the draw for tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and consider subscribing if you want to see more content about Worlds 2023. Bye.